Welcome back to Philosophy and Ethics in Games, the series where I break down the stories in some of our favorite games and ask the tough questions to figure out what is right and what is wrong. I'm Josh Bearheart Hawk, and today we're starting the final season of TellTale Games The Walking Dead. In case you missed any of the previous episodes, I've linked a playlist in the description below. As I continue to break down the series, I'll add new videos to the playlist so you can find them all in one place. Season 4 of TellTale Games The Walking Dead was called The Final Season, and the first episode, titled Done Running, released on August 14th, 2018, gaining mostly positive reviews. The season itself puts us back in the shoes of Clementine, several years after the events of A New Frontier, and after she's reunited with AJ. This season only has 4 episodes, and like the previous 3 seasons, we'll be breaking them down and examining the major choices and conundrums that the game presents. We won't be examining every possible angle, but we'll be looking at how the story goes if we follow it from the most ethical position we can. The opening of the episode finds us riding along in a car as Clementine drives and AJ plays with an empty revolver in the back seat. Both of them are much older than when we last saw them, and it's clear that Clem has been teaching AJ survival skills. From the conversation, we find out they haven't eaten much in a while, and an attempt at distracting AJ by having him read turns out to be a bad idea, as the only book available is apparently a cookbook. Before long, they come to an old, abandoned-looking building surrounded by overturned train cars and various railings and junk. It appears someone had used the place as a home at some point, and we see a bell with a sign telling anyone who may be friendly to ring it. Ringing the bell awakens a zombie that was passed out closer to the actual building, and after taking that zombie out and breaking into the train station, Clem and AJ discover the former occupants of the place tied to a pair of chairs living their best zombie life. The couple apparently decided to end their own lives after tying themselves up and leaving a note to let anyone who found them know that they wanted to be left zombified together forever. They also apparently locked up the back room to the building and made sure the key was tied to one of their belts so that anyone who might be interested in scavenging would need to either find another way in or risk a bite or a scratch. Now, under normal circumstances, the right thing to do is to respect the wishes of the deceased. If they want to be buried, cremated, hung from a rock to warn others of the consequences of piracy, their final wishes are their own and we should do our best to carry them out. That being said, in this specific instance, we need to focus on our own survival first and foremost. We don't know what supplies might exist in the back room, and the only 2 ways to get in there are to kill the zombies or to shove AJ through an opening in the gate where they used to issue tickets. Now, shoving AJ through the hole just seems like a bad idea on the surface, but it becomes even worse when we think back to the 4th episode of Season 2, when Clem climbed through a similar opening to try to open a door for Bonnie and Mike. That memory, if nothing else, would prevent Clementine from making the same mistake as she nearly died when a zombie they didn't see hiding sprung up. Dispatching the zombies and getting into the room, they find some ammo for AJ's gun and a trap door that leads to a cache of food hidden under the floor. But the stash was booby-trapped, and Clem and AJ are barely able to get out of the room in time before it explodes. As a side note, we can assume the zombies we killed to get the key were the ones who set up the booby trap, and the fact that they would do something like that just wipes away any guilt that might exist for not leaving them in the state they requested. While Clem and AJ are relatively unharmed, the sound of the explosion brings in a horde of zombies that had apparently been hiding in the woods, and they have to fight to escape the building. But getting back to the car isn't much better, as the horde surrounds them, and Clementine winds up crashing before they get very far. But it turns out the zombies weren't the only thing lurking in the woods. As Clementine passes out from her injuries after the accident, she sees arrows taking out zombies, and someone pulls AJ from the wreckage. Sometime later, Clem finds herself waking up in an unfamiliar room, with one of her arms being taped to the post of a bed that she's lying in. She manages to get free pretty easily, and after exploring the room a bit, she heads out into the hallway to try to figure out where she's been taken. It doesn't take long, however, to run into someone, as she hides from a figure that turns out to be a little boy. But he isn't alone, as an older boy joins the party, telling Clementine that his name is Marlon. It turns out the place is an old boarding school run completely by kids, and Marlon is in charge, or at least he seems to be. They seem to be pretty well established, with hunting parties and a hierarchy that most adult-run groups we've seen in the series would love to have. It looks like a sort of paradise, but if there's one thing that we know about the Walking Dead universe, things are not always what they seem. Clementine is reunited with AJ, meeting a few older kids along the way, before heading outside the wall to assist with killing zombies, so that one of the hunting parties can get back inside without being eaten. As we clear the area, we find out the group has also set up a ton of traps, and we get the chance to use them all as we take out the dead. As they finish up, we find a couple of points to really hone in on here. The first revolves around one member of the hunting party arguing with Marlon about the need to scout further out for food, as they are having trouble finding enough food to feed everyone. Marlon brushes this off, telling him that they'll discuss it later, but it's a point that the entire episode winds up hinging on. We don't know exactly how long they've been in this place, or much about them in general for that matter, but we can infer from this brief conversation that there are some problems with the inner workings of the group. Secondly, as the group is coming back inside the walls, Marlon winds up taking an elbow to his groin when he walks up on AJ unexpectedly. This is the second time the boy has physically harmed someone, having bitten a girl named Ruby on the hand earlier, and it's starting to look like a pattern with him overreacting to things. Now, the situation with hitting Marlon could be due to his anxiety from always being on the lookout for zombies, as Marlon kind of walked up behind him without warning. But the situation with Ruby points to self-control issues. He is only a kid, and he doesn't have a lot of experience with people in general, but it's still something interesting to note for future reference. AJ has the chance to apologize for these outbursts, and he does seem genuinely sorry for them. The group is willing to forgive him, and before long they're all sharing a meal before Marlon, Lewis, and Brody invite Clem to play a game of cards as they all get to know each other a bit better. After all of that, Clem and AJ head off to bed, but AJ isn't tired yet and wants to spend some time drawing before going to sleep. This desire is partially driven by a box of art supplies pulled down earlier by Clem as she was exploring the room, and it turns out the box actually belongs to a boy named 10. Violet comes in to retrieve them, and this is the first time we really have a decision to make with regard to AJ and sharing. You can choose to give the box back or tell him it's okay to keep it. Violet doesn't seem overly concerned with it, but urging him to give it back is the right thing to do. He seems a little disappointed, but he's willing to give it back after finishing the drawing that he is working on. And as he's drawing, we learn a little bit more about the group as Violet opens up to Clementine. It turns out the room that Clem and AJ are now in once belonged to a pair of girls known as Sophie and Minerva, who had it decorated with paintings that Sophie would make using the art supplies. About a year prior to Clementine's arrival, the twin sisters had been out scavenging with Marlon and Brody, and they wound up being killed by zombies out past the safe zone. The next morning, Clem and AJ make their way to Marlon's office, meeting 10 and giving us the second chance to teach AJ about sharing. These little moments where we can help instill values in AJ are actually kind of nice, and really bring a level of realism to the characters that has been really hit or miss since Season 1. He's young enough to need a lot of guidance, and his lack of experience with people other than Clem gives us a lot of room to have a similar impact on him that Lee had on Clementine. We also get the chance to get to know the community dog, Rosie, as she comes in just ahead of Marlon to give Clem a scare. The only other dog we've seen Clementine come into contact with was Sam in Season 2, Episode 1, and that didn't turn out well for either of them, so it's understandable that she would be hesitant to be around Rosie. That aside, Marlon offers Clem and AJ the chance to join the community and asks the pair to assist with either fishing alongside Violet and Brody or hunting with Lewis and Asim. We also learn a little bit more about the general area, with Marlon mentioning the greenhouse is overgrown and unusable, and telling Clem to stay inside the safe zone because anytime anyone goes outside of it,
bad shit happens. People die or disappear.
It's hard to trust anyone at this point, but Marlon does seem to be at least sincere in his desire to keep the kids safe, and he asks Clementine to help him with that before she finally heads out to help Louis and Asim. Louis seems to be a bit of a jokester, not really taking anything serious, and Asim is more down to earth, leading to a bit of friction when they're out trying to catch food. Despite the tense situation, the group is able to catch a rabbit before we're presented with a choice when they find a baby rabbit in one of their snares. Louis suggests killing it as they need the food, but Asim points out that it isn't big enough and should be allowed to grow up before being eaten. While this isn't necessarily an ethical choice, Asim does have a good point that not leaving the babies to grow up will hurt the group in the future, as the number of animals to hunt will drop to 0. There has to be some control and purpose to the choices when it comes to hunting their food if they want to survive in the long term. As Asim heads back with the lone rabbit they were able to catch, Louis leads Clem and AJ to the fishing shack to check on the progress that Violet and Brody have made. It turns out they really haven't been able to get anything, as someone has not only raided the traps they laid out to catch fish, but also stolen the supplies from the shack. It's a big blow to the community, but as Brody leaves to update Marlon on the situation, Clementine suggests a spot where they might be able to find food. The train station she and AJ found that is just outside the safe zone. Though Violet and Louis are both a bit hesitant, the group eventually makes their way to the building, using Louis as a distraction to make their way around the herd of zombies still roaming the area. Once inside, Clem and AJ find that while some of the food was destroyed in the earlier blast, there is still a decent amount left. But it doesn't come without some trouble, as a man surprises Clem and threatens to shoot her if she doesn't give him the food. Before he can get too much though, AJ pops out of the hole and threatens the man at gunpoint, telling him not to steal from them. And this is where things kind of start going downhill. For one thing, the man tries to assert that he's not stealing because the supplies don't belong to Clem and AJ either. While it could be argued that he is right as they only recently found the stash, they are technically in possession of it and could easily claim ownership at this point. What he's doing is robbing a couple of kids, which he probably sees as easy marks. Now, he does seem to be willing to just leave given the circumstances, but honestly, the rules of engagement are a lot different now than they were years ago when the outbreak started, and we can't just let him walk away. He could follow us back, and he really doesn't seem like someone that we should be trusting. It's one of those moments where you kind of need to go with your gut feeling. And I need to make a quick note here because unlike the first 3 seasons, I've not played this season and have managed to mostly avoid spoilers overall. This one might be the easiest to cover in this series because of that, with my choices following along a blind ethical line instead of risking any kind of skew due to knowledge of what is coming. I always try to remain as objective as I can when discussing philosophy and ethics, of course, but none of us is perfect, and I'm sure that some of the decisions I've made in the first few seasons were at least partially made because the outcome was known. When you know what's going to happen, it makes it a little easier to say one choice is more ethical than another because ethics depends at least partially on the outcome of a decision. With that out of the way, Clementine pushes the man backward, causing him to fall through the window behind him where zombies grab hold and pull him out. With the man out of the way, they manage to fill the bags that they have full of food before leaving and making their way back to the school. Everyone is happy to see the haul they managed to bring back, but Brody gets really upset when she finds out that they had to leave the safe zone to get it. But leaving the safe zone is only part of the problem, as she winds up freaking out even more when she hears about the man they'd run into. While this panic doesn't make immediate sense, we find out more when Clem and AJ are awoken in the middle of the night by shouting from somewhere in the building. Telling AJ to stay put, Clem goes to investigate, eventually finding Brody and Marlon in the basement fighting about something. Brody is saying something about another group being back and saying that they need to confess something to the group before they spot Clementine. Marlon wants Clem to just leave, but the secret comes out as Brody tells Clem that 10 sisters, Sophie and Minerva, didn't get killed by zombies. Rather, they were given to another group by Marlon as a way to secure his own safety. Before she can get much more out, however, Marlon hits her with his flashlight and she falls to the ground. Just before she dies, she manages to tell Clem that Marlon was planning to trade her and AJ to the Raiders if they show up again. As Brody's taking her last breath, Marlon sprints to the cellar door, locking Clem inside as he apologizes for leaving her with the soon-to-be zombie and saying that he can't let her tell the others. But it's going to take a lot more than a single zombie in a cellar door to take Clementine out. And she manages to take the reanimated Brody out and escape into the courtyard to find AJ pointing his gun at Marlon and demanding to know where Clem is. As he's telling them all that Clem murdered Brody, Clementine calls him out and we get a tense conversation where he eventually admits to essentially selling the twins to secure his own safety. And once again, there's a couple of things to unpack here. For one, if Brody considers himself a leader, then there is no way he should have made any kind of trade like that. Real leaders put themselves in harm's way to protect others, not the other way around. Of course, he is just a kid at the end of the day, and can't be expected to make the same decisions that a seasoned leader would make. And we're forced to take his actions under consideration as we have to decide what to do with him. We have the option to send him away, keep him as a prisoner, or allow him to remain in the community as a member, but not a leader. Given the circumstances, and the fact that everyone knows what he did, the ethical thing to do here is to let him remain, but not as a leader. He made a stupid choice that he thought was the best thing for himself and the community. He had good intentions, and even killing Brody was a crime of passion in a fit of rage rather than a malicious act. He showed immediate remorse, but also showed that he is incapable of making good choices when he needs to. But the decision is moot because as Clementine makes up her mind, a gunshot rings out and Marlon falls to the ground to reveal AJ standing behind him, pointing his revolver. And I find this ending to the episode to be infuriating in a way, because AJ references the advice Clementine gave him about shooting at the very start of the episode.
I didn't hesitate.
It's so very frustrating because it feels like the choices matter line is being thrown in our faces in the moment. Like, yeah, your choices matter, but they don't matter in the way you think they do. Here I am, trying to make the best decisions I can to minimize suffering and follow humanist principles. And TellTale is just tossing everything out and using a single piece of advice I gave this kid I've spent all of an hour raising to destroy any hope I'd had of making a positive impact. And the worst part is, even without seeing the other possible endings, I can easily see AJ using the other optional pieces of advice in a line after the shooting. What? I aimed for the head? What? I saved the last bullet for myself. After everything from Season 3, I started the season with a lower bar, and I'm still disappointed after the first episode. There's 3 more to go, and while I have a general idea of what I might see, I'm also not keeping my hopes up. I know this season got some good reviews, and maybe it'll surprise me, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. With that being said, I want to hear your thoughts on the episode and what choices you made along the way. How did you handle AJ and his propensity for biting and hitting? What about the man who ambushed them in the train station? Let me know and share your reasoning so that we can figure out what the most ethical choices are. For those interested in supporting the channel in other ways and getting some cool perks like early access and their name in the videos, I've got a Patreon and channel memberships. As always, I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.